to come in between your knowledge sharing to be imparted by our guest today, Rinske Geerlings from Sydney, Australia. I am Madhusudan, CEO of San Madhur. We are into corporate event management, consulting, HR solutions, and so on and so forth. Uh, Thank you to Alvin Integrated Services who is hosting this and giving me the opportunity to moderate the session today. So this is a knowledge sharing, ISO based knowledge sharing webinar number 6 in a series over the last 2.5 months. And today we have Rinske Geerlings, who is the founder of BAU, the most used word in ISO 22301 business standard, that is BCMS, business as usual. She is the founder of the company called BAU, business as usual. And she is having around more than 20 years of experience of serving the various domains, various industries, various segments. When I say domain is risk management, business continuity, information security, she is a leading tutor also of all these domains. And it is really a pleasure to mention that she is the awardee of Risk Consultant of the Year by RMIA in 2017. Then she was awarded the BPW Business Woman of the Year in 2013. And then there are so many things she has been awarded. So I should be very brief. And other than that, she has a unique quality of she is a lead singer and a manager of platform called Sophie G, which is a music project-based uh, organization, and maximum of the earnings go to the charity work for, you know, the project is called Playing for Change to the underprivileged children and other things. So thank you so much, Geerling, being with us. Once again, I welcome all the participants because without the participants, there is no point of our running these webinars, knowledge sharing session. And we normally keep it very interactive. So there is no hard and fast that no one can speak in between. Anybody wants to say something, want to point out something during the presentation of Geerling, please feel free, just indicate you want to say something, because there and then the question can be answered. Not that we don't want to run it as a monologue like a university session or something like that. Let it be interactive, because we are all coming with a lot of experience and exposure, but yet willing to learn a lot. So though physically distant, digitally we are connected and we are able to learn. And thank you once again. And over to Rinske.
Great, thank you very much. I look forward to presenting this for you for such a great international group. We can't be together in the same space, unfortunately, because that would be really fun for me to go to India one day, or one of the countries that you are from. I know you're coming from various places, but anyway, we have to do it the way we're doing it now, and yeah, with all the digital tools that we have. So I'm going to share my screen, and I hope this works because I just tried it again. Now, can you guys all see? Seems a bit strange. Can you see a white screen? Can someone comment?
Yeah,
You see what is business continuity planning?
that's
Yes.
right.
Correct, great. All right, so yes, all the way from Australia, I'm dialing in. I hope to meet some of you guys once in Sydney in the future, hopefully. And what I've been asked to present on today is about business continuity planning, but a little bit the practical side, as well as the ISO 22301 standards. So I often get asked, you know, do standards help? Do they make or break a process? Because standards are sometimes seen by people like a little bit tick in the box, and not actually the tools on how to make the process really embedded and change the culture of an organization to actually adopt certain processes like business continuity planning. So in my session, I have integrated basically a little bit of information on what that ISO standard is all about, the specific ISO 22301, but also how that then translates to the real world. So I made 10 tips basically, and we'll run through them. They have various examples of other organizations also included. And hopefully throughout or at the end, we can, we can share some knowledge. You can actually share your knowledge with the group as well. There's a chat function that is being monitored by the organizers. And also, if there's a quick question you'd like to ask, you can unmute, and we can also at the end have an open knowledge sharing session with unmuting. So I guess for some people who've joined, they may have never done anything with business continuity planning. So basically what business continuity is all about, you can see a couple of definitions from the standard in there. And the first one is, well, the capability of an organization to continue the delivery of products and services within acceptable timeframes at predefined capacity during a disruption. So whether it's power outages, floods, fires, explosions, pandemics, anything to do that, with basically that can disrupt your organization's operations. And some keywords in there are about the delivery of product and services within acceptable timeframes and predefined capacity. So those things you don't just know, if that makes sense. You have to basically analyze, assess your organization, and therefore you will start agreeing with internal and external stakeholders what is acceptable. So all of that is included in business continuity planning. It might be useful for everybody to mute if you're not. I hear a lot of pots and pans, some food being cooked, I think. I'm getting hungry from it. But if you're able to mute, or maybe the organizers can manually mute if there's noises coming. Thank you for that. And yeah, what you can see also in terms of the definition, BCP, or business continuity planning, is more the documented information, so actually having a plan ready to go if something happens. Whereas business continuity as an end-to-end process is more I guess an operational process, or a second nature type process in an organization that covers the what ifs. Yeah, the what ifs. So if something goes wrong. And the BCP is more the documented plan. So quick question for the chat. You can chat and type away in there, more for you guys to have a discussion amongst yourselves while I'm presenting this. A question is a BCP enough? And will it help you no matter what happens? As long as you document a plan, is that good enough? That's my question. It's a bit of a challenging question, but you can dump all your ideas and thoughts in the chat. And yeah, I'm sure we can have some either some humor with it, but also some seriousness. I already see someone called A saying, no, it's not enough. So that's great. That's the right answer. We're going to go and continue on in my presentation on what else is required, So another misconception that I hear that people tend to think is BCP, it's all about, well, maybe pandemics now, because that's what we're now having to deal with. But usually people think about floods and fires, anything to do with the building or the IT, so building, IT, maybe pandemic type flu. Now, there's a whole heap of other things. For example, you might be locked out of your building because of a safety or security incident. You might have cybercrime, data leaks and things like that. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. So there are just different scenarios you need to think about. You might have a supplier that is out of action. Your business is fine, your staff are fine, your building is up and running, your supplies are there, but your supplier externally is out of action. So that actually could impact on your business too. Other things there, you may be locked inside of your building due to a safety issue. So, or a heat wave, for example, where people are actually recommended to stay inside in a cool place. It could be things like I mentioned, power failures and things like that. So a couple of real life examples there in terms of case studies, what has actually happened. So you see some examples here. For example, a diesel tanker catching fire along a major highway. Now that has impact potentially on transport. It has impact on the environment. It has impact on people who are in that area. It has impact on gridlock, transport options that are not working anymore. So actually cars being stuck somewhere. It can actually cause an enormous amount of damage or permanent damage to an area. So these are some examples. This one is actually from Asia, from Malaysia, as far as I remember. And here you can see a few other things that have happened. Cargo trains derailing. You might have some examples around bombing, and actually terrorist attack. And then there's some examples from the region, a little bit broader. You can see here some impacts from the pandemic where foreigners cannot enter a certain country, as we all have dealt with. That can also really disrupt some businesses. And then you can see here Indian monsoon floods, you know, and some of you have clearly dealt with these. And this will have people impact, but also then indirect business impacts. Yeah, with our process of business continuity, we're dealing with mostly business impact, but really one of the most important ingredients in any business is its people. You know, even if the building is not 100% perfect or the systems are down, you can still, with your staff, at least maintain the reputation of your organization, or you can tell your customers that there's a delay, for example. So yeah, having impact on staff is actually usually the primary focus, or should have the primary focus of any business, to start making some provisions for that. Power outages in part of central Singapore, you can see here. So that can be really having knock-on effects on other provisions, you know, like transport, for example, in this one. And you can see here hacking attempts. This one you might remember from a European. There's a few Europeans logged into this session, as far as I understand. You know, when there was a supply chain disruption, and actually all caused by a cyber attack in Rotterdam port, where I'm originally from. You know, so from Holland. So that had you know number of weeks impact, but then actually became number of months, because you have indirect supply chain impacts there as well. And you can see here, of course, you know, COVID-19 patients and potential subsequent data leaks around health information, and a few other things like DDoS attacks. Some of you may come from a technical background. So there's just a number of things that can happen, and a BCP should have all of that included as sort of an umbrella approach. So I don't advocate a full separate pandemic plan, for example. You know, I advocate a framework where pandemic flu has certain impacts that could be covered by BCP. Therefore, it should be integrated. Because what I've seen people do is make ad hoc a plan for example, pandemic or power failures or cyber attacks or something. And there's a lot of overlap between those sorts of plans. For example, for a flood or a fire or an explosion, in terms of BCP, you know, once you've done the initial response, in terms of business continuity planning, it's probably just one type of impact, which is, hey, we cannot get to the building, whether it's a fire or flood or an explosion, doesn't matter, you know, so that you can find quite good opportunities to make a simple and more concise business continuity plan if you're actually looking for those commonalities. And I'll show you an example in a few minutes on how you can document that. One of the main purposes of my presentation and my general work that I do in my consulting business is actually to reduce volume of plans, you know, of documentation, and still be ready if something happens actually today or tomorrow, you know, if your staff having to actually activate that plan. So having big volume documents usually creates a lot of that documentation going out of date very quickly. So that doesn't help. It's actually more risky because people think, oh, we have a plan, right? But if that plan is not actually valid, it gives a false sense of security, right? So now actually it's double not safe to have that, you know, and it really doesn't help. So it's better maybe to have no plan for some scenarios and staff having to jump on the ball and actually come up with creative solutions and not relying on an incorrect plan. As an example of that, I can tell you, I had a client where they had a disaster recovery procedure for one of their systems, but it was out of date and it had incorrect information on IP addresses of servers and recovery procedures. And by staff activating those wrong disaster recovery procedures, they created more impact of that particular incident. So, and a false sense of security on top of that. So having to rely on something that doesn't even work is actually quite risky. And they had to backpedal out of that by restoring data. They didn't know what was actually the correct version anymore. It was really, really confusing. So sometimes, like I said, it's even better to have no plan than a bad plan. Yeah, so that's just a little bit of a left field thinking there. Now, as you can see here, I've put in there, if you can please respect the copyright of these slides, because I have actually included quite a lot of PCB or ISO documentation. and also, and especially the ISO standard extracts, you know, they're under copyright restrictions. The items that are from my own business, which is business as usual, yeah, I'd really like you to respect them, or at least acknowledge my business in there, if you don't mind. So here you can see an extract, or sort of the front section of that BCP standard, which is the ISO 22301 2019. And you can see it's just written really in a business-like style. It's not really a technical document in the sense of it doesn't have certain threats listed, what to do in a flood or a fire or an explosion or a pandemic. It doesn't go into that level of detail. It's really generic. You can apply to any type of business, big or small, any industry. It's basically showing the methodology or the outcomes that you're trying to achieve with a good business continuity plan, or a good business continuity management system, as you would call it, the BCM system. So that's a little bit about that ISO 22301 standard. Now, a couple of slides, and you can see here my presentation will be full of pictures. I think by now a lot of people amongst you might be webinared out a little bit and have seen too many slides with lots of text, and trying to absorb all of that, it usually doesn't sit for too long in your memory. So sometimes with pictures you can create a whole different perception. So I'm using a lot of you know, visual sort of pictures, and that you can maybe relate to your situation as well. So the first slide deck I wanted to show you here is, you may remember this one. What I find is people thinking, you know, we don't really need a business continuity plan. We will just make it up as we go along, you know. So what the risk of that is, you can see here. For example, if the disaster is, in this case, a little white car that ended up in the water, that may be your incident, as an analogy. So that guy with the orange crane, he's coming around and helping in that disaster, you know, like fixing that car, getting it out of the water. And what happens next? That was not tested, right? So this was like a knee-jerk ad hoc solution that these people came up with. Oh, we'll just get this guy with his crane and we can pull that car out. Now that's sort of the things that sometimes happen where people think that's a good idea, but it's actually giving now two disasters. Now they've got the white car and the crane in the water, yeah? The next thing is, oh, okay, how do we get all of that now fixed? Come up with another Band-Aid solution. And here we go, that's all fine, you know, we're pulling it out. Oh, and what do you see? Now, this is a hoax, you know, it's a mini hack on a Photoshop type application, you know, that last picture there. But the point of this little slideshow is a lot of organizations think they can just, you know, make it up as they go along if there's an incident. Especially in my opinion, where I work a lot is in, for example, organizations like manufacturing and transport and logistics. And those types of organizations, they do have a lot of built-in, how shall I say, a lot of built-in continuity and solutions for things that go wrong. Because, for example, they may have a supply chain issue, or they may have equipment failing, and they tend to come up very quickly with fixes for that. So those sorts of people tend to think, why do I bother having a whole business continuity plan? Because I'm fixing things as we go along and I don't need that sort of plan. I'll just make it up. So what you get in that situation sometimes is you're relying on single points of success, a single key person or a key piece of equipment or a key transport option or something, or a key supplier. And what I'm trying to say here is all of those sorts of assumptions, if there's even an additional challenge, I call that Murphy's Law. You know, if there's two incidents happening at the same time, or one incident on the wrong day of the month, like payday, or, you know, when you're just rolling out a new product or service to the customers, and on that day you've got a power failure or a system outage, you know, you might have double challenges, which is very common actually. And with that type of situation, well, often you haven't got that sort of capability to fix that very quickly. Now here you can see also if it's untested solutions, and also is the priority clear? Is it actually justified to hire on that day quickly those two trucks to pull that car out of the water? I see organizations do the same. For example, if there's a system outage, they quickly get some sort of external supplier to quickly program some changes and everything. But that's quite a substantial investment potentially. You know, has that been justified? Did you look beforehand at your priorities? Who are the most important customers? What are the most important products? What are the most important systems that support those products? And what staff do we need? Those sorts of questions you can ask beforehand. Yeah. And they're hard to answer beforehand sometimes, to get all the answers from different business units and different directors and managers, to acknowledge that sometimes other departments are more urgently required or important than them, let alone how hard it would be in an actual incident to come up with all those priorities. Yeah, so when it's peacetime, when it's easy times, think about all those priorities then. And often this is not done properly. It's often done bottom up, where you might have done this type of work where you send a BIA, business impact analysis template, to all the different divisions in your business. You ask them, fill in some ratings and what do you need if something happens. What I find is you end up with a whole pile of 20, 30 spreadsheets. You're putting that in a big workbook, and then you send it off to IT or facilities to say, can you provide all this if there's an incident? And there's millions of different assumptions in there and contradictory requirements and things like that. So I would also always go top down, really look first at the real key business priorities, and from there work your way to what are those critical people, departments, resources. So that's a little bit of a background there, and I will come to that in a more visual way with the templates that I'll show you. Now, there's also a question, will this presentation be shared? Yes, it will be shared as a video for the group that actually was in this session. So you guys are lucky you're getting all of this. And there will be quite substantial intellectual property at the end of this set of slides, where I share a number of templates. So once again, please respect the copyright on there. And if you're rewatching that video, yeah, I've absolutely, I hope you can definitely use all of that, but we just a little bit careful with who can access it. That's all. Yeah. So you guys are of course here. There's now already 65 of you. So of course, I know at least all of you can use that. All right. So what if you never face an actual disaster? This is another question I'd like to cover before my 10 tips. I often get asked this question like, oh, we're building all this BCP and we're doing BCP testing and we're doing all this training of staff and we're getting senior management engaged and all these enormous amount of activities. It's such a big effort. Honestly, if there's never an actual disaster, why do we bother with all of this? Well, there's a few answers to that. You can look at cheaper insurance, business interruption insurance for starters. Like if you actually can achieve that discount on the insurance every year because you can show a good business continuity plan, well, you might be actually paying for the whole business continuity effort by having that insurance discounted. So make sure you talk to your insurers, because over the years, you might get some good discounts on the premiums, and that will pay for your BCP efforts. Here you see a few other things. Stakeholder confidence, for example, your external customers or regulators, they will have more confidence in your business. If you have a plan, and this is all without any incident actually happening, right? With a good plan, you actually can also achieve compliance. You might have certain regulators, third-party compliance, customer requirements. And so it actually really helps with those sorts of processes. Better decisions. Now, doing business continuity properly should give you more capability to really implement certain controls and invest in the right ones, not over-invest or under-invest. Now that is good, because that gives you a more stable financial position, I guess, to see, hey, have we actually invested in the right controls? Either it's preventative controls or continuity provision, like impact reducing controls. So doing BCP properly with your business impact analysis and your risk assessment, it actually will give you that capability. And that is every day a benefit in your pocket. Another one there is competitive advantage. You might have, some of you work for businesses that have to tender for work, putting tenders out to different customers. I know for a fact, for example, if I want to deal with departments like defense or other major government departments or banks, they will ask me as my business, do I have a business continuity plan? Yeah, so once again, use that. If you're having trouble in your business getting senior management engagement, these sorts of triggers might change their mind a little bit, because they start seeing, hey, we don't actually need to wait for a real incident for this plan to be of benefit to us as a business. And senior level engagement or leadership commitment is actually a key component of that ISO 22301 standard. And it's written in that standard as if you just achieve that, do this, do that, but it's not that easy, you know, and that's why I'm showing you some real life ingredients into that discussion that you might have with your senior leaders in that business that you work for, or in the government department where you work, to say, how do we get your commitment? And these are some real life examples, like I said. Now, the last example there is, or the last benefit of a good BCP is better day-to-day business. Even if it's not a big pandemic or a flood or a fire or something like this, you know, it could just be a smaller outage. But if you build your BCP for the big Godzilla style scenarios, you know, the big ticket items, then you probably are more prepared for the small ones too. The little things that the one system going down instead of the whole data center, for example. You know, and that these things might happen on a weekly, day-to-day basis, where you have small hiccups that happen in the business, a couple of key staff members being ill, for example, or, you know, one system not going well on a particular day, or, you know, and those things you can actually see an extract of the BCP can help with those sorts of situations too. So I hope that makes sense. You know, these are day-to-day benefits. Even if you never have a disaster, that actually you pull the whole BCP out for, that you actually invoke end to end. So now the last picture before we go towards our tips is running from the bear. If all of us are running from the bear, actually a good question for the chat box. So you guys can all answer this one. If all of us 64 people are running from a bear, how fast do you as a person need to be?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that? I just heard something. Anyway, you guys can type in the chat, how fast do you think you might need to be to survive? Faster than the bear, or, you know, faster than everybody else, or how fast do you need to be?
I think faster than anybody else who is running together. You need
So you don't have to be the fastest, right? You don't have to be the fastest runner. You just have to be faster than the other slow guy behind you, as long as you're not the slowest. Faster than the slowest person. That's it. So, yeah, it's interesting. Most businesses don't think that way anymore, because they now know if you're just doing a little bit better than all the other competitors, it might not be good enough, because customers are getting very smart. You know, they understand, hey, we should expect something from our suppliers. But in the past, this used to apply really well. You know, if you had, for example, in a particular region in India, there's a major flood and all the manufacturing companies are affected by it. If you're doing a little bit better than the others, your competitors, actually, you could gain a lot of business. You know, you could take on all the work from all the others. But it's, you know, these days, a lot of scenarios, customers understand that they should expect more than that from you. They expect you to actually almost be able to run from that bear and be faster than the entire bear. You know, so if there's a cyber attack, for example, you used to be able to say, oh, sorry, yeah, we are affected by this, but, you know, we're doing a bit better than the rest of the competitors. Now customers are going, well, that's not good enough. You should have provisions in place. You should have spare equipment, or you know, you should have key experts who are helping with the cyber attack, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's not it's not actually enough anymore to say, I'll just do a little bit better than the rest of the pack. So, all right.
So,
I think there's a question from Kartin.
Yeah, Rinske. Yeah, may I say something, Rinske?
Yeah, sure.
At this point in time, maybe allow, I think, some interaction for about 5-7 minutes. Maybe 2-3 people wants to ask something, or maybe something like that, up till where we have covered till the last this bear race. So anybody wants to ask anything, or anybody wants to just contribute to what Rinske has just presented, and in addition to this BCP, because business continuity planning, I mean, let us not remain to the planning on paper. Let's be interactive, I think. So anybody wants to say something?
Yeah, you're most welcome to unmute and have a chat. I might just start with this one from Mr. Prasad. There was a question, hey, does cross-country BCP still work on scenarios like pandemic? Well, my advice is, of course, have a plan A, B, and C, because cross-country BCP, it doesn't work anymore at the moment. You can't just say, oh, we've got a disaster, the system is down in India, we'll just send a couple of guys over to our Malaysian site or to our European office. Those things are not flying at the moment because of the pandemic having those border restrictions. So with any of those scenarios, I would always recommend having, like I said, plan A, B, and C. So if that solution doesn't work, what can we do locally? And what can we do, for example, as a manual workaround without that system? Maybe we can write it on a piece of paper or something. It sounds old-fashioned, but a lot of businesses, especially in transport and manufacturing, they actually do have a lot of workarounds in place and alternate sort of ways to do it.
Yeah, I think fairly convincing. May I request Anirudh has posted some questions. Can you unmute Anirudh yourself and ask the question yourself, because that others can also hear, and then maybe Rinske can answer. Anirudh.
Okay. Hi, Rinske. This is Anirudh here.
Hi, Anirudh.
My question was in regards to BCP planning. When we are planning for a BCP, how do we plan for incidents where it's more like a norm? For example, in Tokyo, if you think about tsunamis and disasters, which happens, it's more like a norm, and it's not a single event which happens. So how do we normally approach if we have to do a BCP on that?
When you say norm, do you mean it's more common?
Yes, yeah. That's right.
Well, look, I've worked especially in technology environments, but also in some of those facilities and premises related environments, where it's all about how you define your threshold for invoking a BCP. So for example, if you deal every week with a tsunami, eventually it becomes a second nature type thing. You might have certain provisions and you don't have to activate the entire BCP because everybody knows, hey, it's happening, we're doing X, Y, Z. Okay, we can continue servicing our customers because we know how to, put our alternate workarounds in place. In that sort of situation, you might say we don't have to, invoke the whole BCP, if that makes sense. Yeah, so and I see it in IT environment actually, where I don't know if there's many who work in IT, but there's a process that usually is in place that's called MIM, Major Incident Management in IT, MIM process. Does that ring a bell to some? You're most welcome to type a few comments in the chat if you like. So MIM process also works towards major incidents in IT, for example, an application going down or multiple users not being able to use it or data failure or something. And like I said, everything comes down to the thresholds. So maybe you say the major incident management process in IT only covers us for certain incidents that have no more than, 3% of our workforce affected by a certain outage, or no more than one application at a time, or no more than one server in our data center at a time. So you can define where you say, look, this is still a kind of a BAU, business as usual type approach, and where we actually say, from what point on do we say, okay, now we have to actually invoke the whole BCP, because it now becomes a whole different management structure. It becomes different crisis communication. It becomes a whole different internal structure to deal with this. But that can also change over time. Yeah. So does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah. I think actually you pretty much covered on that. The reason why I asked on this question was basically the degree of any incident which happens might vary on a daily basis. For a country like Tokyo, if you're thinking about if it is on more like a common thing which is happening in terms of tsunami, so maybe the effect which happens, the degree might differ. So when you have a constantly changing repercussions on a particular incident, how do we actually plan that? So that's the reason I was thinking on how do we approach on that. Yeah.
Well, maybe a tip for that, as in an additional tip, and by the way, I hope tsunamis are not happening every day there, but I'm sure smaller variations of it. But look, what I also always recommend people is just plan for consequences. So really identify what are the impacts that could disrupt my business, whether it's lack of access to your building, or whether it's, hey, the supply chain is disrupted, or whether it is your IT is all down. And think about some major ones there. And don't think about the cause, because for BCP, for business continuity planning, you actually don't care about the cause. You don't care about the chance either. You don't care about the likelihood of
It's more on the effect, right?
Exactly. It's about the impact, the consequence, and having a plan, you know, ready to go if that impact hits you. The actual nature of the incident, the immediate response procedures to clean things up or whatever to immediately respond, that's not so interesting for a BCP. For BCP, it's the next step. How do we continue our business? How do we continue serving customers? Yeah, does that make sense? For example, you can have hundreds of different incidents happening. I mentioned, you know, explosions, floods, pandemics, IT failures, you know, all sorts of things. Each of those will have an initial response procedure, yeah, to deal with that, an initial impact reducing response. But that's very specific to that incident. A flood is different from a fire or an explosion or gridlock. But the next stage is saying, now, how do we continue servicing our customers during this whole thing? It's actually quite generic. You look at what is the impact of the incident happening, or multiple incidents at the same time. You mentioned tsunami, you know, you could have, in combination of that, you could have power failures and telecommunication outages, but the impacts are actually what you care about in that moment. And there may be just 2 or 3, no access to your building and your IT is not connected anymore. Seems pretty simple.
I hope, Anirudh, I hope you are satisfied with the answer of Rinske.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks
for
Rinske.
answering.
Thanks for the question.
Just to add, sorry to interrupt in between, just to add, so what Anirudh had asked and what Rinske has answered is there is one thing which is basically emerging out of it is when we talk about business continuity planning or business continuity management system applicability, implementation, and how do we do it, how do we not do it, and what do we consider, what do we not consider. So there is a threat and risk assessment analysis is a continuous process to be done. Threat and risk assessment.
Yeah.
And that makes sense when you, it's a continuous process. And we have Rohit Verma also wants to know something. He's saying with the work from home being successful, what further value add can BCM give to the employer? Rohit, you can ask the question. I think read the question. Maybe you want to add something onto it, Rohit Verma.
Yes, Madhu, thank you so much. Rinske. So basically, you know, sometimes I wonder with the current pandemic situation, where prior to the pandemic, people had made elaborate plans on using different response and recovery strategies like work relocation or staff relocation or going to the work area recovery site. But now with pandemic, the work from home being a successful solution, I was just wondering what further, you know, value add can BCM professionals give to their employers. So any thoughts would be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Look, a pandemic and working from home as a result of that is only one scenario. I often ask people, I say, fantastic, you're working from home, everything is happy days. What if tomorrow there's a power failure? Or what if tomorrow the internet goes down? Or what if tomorrow you have in your server room an application failing, but you're not allowed to travel there to actually look at it, you know? So there's always different scenarios that can hit you, even if work from home is all sounding very comfortable. It's just for one scenario, meaning for illness or not being able to use your building as per normal, having all your people congregated. You know, it's one scenario, but there's other scenarios that could happen. You could have supply chain failure tomorrow. Well, your work from home doesn't help with that one. You know, it could be your supplier, and so they need a good plan in place. And in manufacturing, in transport, in logistics, in hospitality, in hospitals, work from home doesn't really work. Like a doctor can't really do everything from home, can they? They can do a few things from home these days, I've noticed, you know, phone consultations and things. But if you've got a private hospital, if that's your business, you still have to have other provisions in place too. Work from home is not really applicable to that kind of business. So if you're in an office, you know, you're working for an office-based environment, work from home sounds like a perfect solution for the scenario of not being able to use your building or having your staff affected by something. But, you know, and I do agree with you, you know, things like shared office environments and crisis control room options and things. We're now thinking, well, crisis control room, that's going to be just Zoom, you know, or WebEx. And that's changed a little, of course, you know, since pandemic, and since working from home. But there's still a lot of businesses and a lot of processes where you can't just have everyone working from home. And especially some of those sectors. You got it? So it's just for one scenario, it works.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. I am Saibal from Kolkata, India. I want to ask ma'am you a question. In the coal mines, underground coal mines scenario, there is a frequent disaster when the water comes from the underground sources.
Yeah.
And in that case, the entire operation of the excavation of coal is suspended, and as well as the human uh, I mean
Impact.
to say
Yeah.
that human fatality impact.
Yeah.
Then, though the mine safety department in India having a plan, but uh, we observe that frequently it fails.
Yeah.
So, how to continue with the normal operation with a BCP
Yeah.
uh,
Look.
in the underground mines safety?
Well, yeah, there are certain scenarios where a great communication plan may be your best BCP, because continuing business underground in a very similar mine and transporting your staff there quick enough. I have not met many mining companies that have that many provisions in place for continuity. But what, and some do, some have 2 or 3 different mines in a close, in a related area, and they can actually move staff around, or, but it's a very difficult scenario where you may not have a full solution, but what you will have is very good communication plans to inform your customers and your supply chain what's happening, what are the estimated outage times, what is the impact on staff, what is the impact on health and safety, contamination, whatever it is. Does that make sense? Like it's not like, I would not advocate you making a plan for every single meteor that can hit the entire city of Delhi. Like, of course, you're not going to have a full plan in place for all of that to continue every business. But what you do want at the very minimum is having great communication protocols in place and fantastic alternate ways to communicate with staff, with external stakeholders, with the community, etc. Because, yeah, like you said, there are some scenarios that are just too big to justify a provision for. Building a spare mine just in case there's a flood in mine 1, yeah, that's not going to be justifiable.
And the entire power supply was got broken down. So the trolleys are not working, and the people are stuck in under the underground, and they have drowned.
Yeah. Look, my experience is for that kind of incident, the time frames are usually fairly lengthy, as in the turnaround times of some of those mining processes are multiple days or weeks in a day-to-day BAU scenario. So their focus is immediately on staff and other people's health and well-being. The occupational health and safety, quickly getting those people, saving lives, basically. Now, that is not BCP. That's initial response, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
If then you say, keep our staff safe enough, let them go, whether it's to hospital or home or with good care. In the meantime, we take a 2-day outage on the business. That may be your plan. It's not really a full continuity plan for the whole business, but at least that's what you can justify. And that's what that whole ISO standard refers to. It's risk assessment, so looking at what could happen to us realistically. And then looking at the business impact analysis, saying, how bad is it? What resources would we need? Is that justifiable to invest in? What are the maximum tolerable periods of disruption? If that is 2 to 3 days for that particular mining company, well, maybe that's better then. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. You need to prioritize properly. No standard will tell you to have a plan in place for every manageable scenario to the full degree, and you recover all your resources and everything. That's not doable. But being very clear internally and then externally on those priorities, on your thresholds, etc., that's more clear.
Yeah, that's the logical way of looking at any standard. Actually, that's the logical way. We'll take for now. We'll take one more question, and then after I think Rinske finishes her tips, then we'll take up more. Yeah, take up more questions. So I would request Mohammed Zinani to kindly ask the question, and then rest of the questions we'll take up after she finishes the tips. Yeah, over to Mohammed.
How are you all?
Mohammed Zinani. Yeah.
Yes, I'm hearing you. I hear you.
You are able to hear us?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, please ask your question. I think you wanted to know something about the annex to follow, which annex or something like that.
yes.
Please ask.
ISO 22.
You're not very well audible on my end. I can't hear the question at all.
I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
He's saying, is there any annex to follow when you were giving the ISO 22301 scenario, the BCP planning or something?
Yes.
Is there an annex to follow?
Yeah.
Well, in my view, the ISO 22301 standard is more a what you want to achieve, not so much how to. And what I teach is, what I apply in my work with my consultants is how to actually do it in practice, what templates, what sort of models. And I would like to get to that, which is tip number 10, on how that might look, to have really simple kind of processes. So, and I agree also with Askarali, this is not a discussion about occupational health and safety. Like that should belong in a different discussion. Like we're talking about what is your business continuity type outcomes that you can achieve. Yeah, but it's all intertwined in some ways, because without good staff initial response procedures to make them healthy and ensure their well-being, you can't activate your BCP normally. So it is linked, but for business continuity, you really focus on those business outputs. So I'll continue on a little bit more. All right, so I think we covered most of these misconceptions. BCP doesn't have to be like climbing Mount Everest, honestly. It can be fairly simple and concise. You just have to approach it in my view, from the top down instead of the bottom up. A couple of other misconceptions you can see here, that people think external suppliers will do everything that they are contractually obliged to do. In my 20 plus years of doing this work, I have seen that being broken all the time. So a supplier of IT or communication or raw materials, they will write beautiful response assumptions in there that they will help you within 3 hours, or they will help you within the first, second day. In a real disaster, if they have multiple customers knocking on their door, they may not actually perform any of those thresholds to you, that they promised in their contracts. You still have to have an answer to your own customers if it happens, and so people assume what is in the contract will actually be delivered. My experience is it's too late. Once you sue them to say, hey, you didn't provide it, your customers are gone, so it can be 3 months down the track. So you still need a plan B if that supplier doesn't actually perform. Now, yeah, you can see a couple of other notes that I mentioned earlier, I think. Okay, tip number 1. Don't rely on one person in your organization who's the BCP coordinator or manager. Make it a small little team, an agile little team from various parts of the organization that can actually grab that plan and run with it, and who keep an eye on whether it's still up to date. I often call them the Fantastic Four. I often find some people representing internal and external departments of a business and say, hey guys, can you be that agile little team? Maybe they're directed or coached by someone like a BC facilitator or a business continuity manager or something, but you need those arms and legs from the business to keep that plan alive. That's what I believe. Another one is use digital or physical sticky note workshops. Let people see how their processes, their key resources, their key staff roles, their key IT systems, how all that hangs together. And with colorful sticky notes, I find that really useful to actually map out how an organization hangs together. How does it function? Many people, they work in one department, in one little role, with one little desk, and they see that desk and that computer all day long. They don't know what happens across all the other divisions. Even harder now, because now they're working from home during this COVID. They don't even see any colleagues. They don't walk over to another department to have a look around. They don't walk over to the manufacturing work floor to see, hey, what are we actually producing in this organization? So I hope I'm making sense here. Having that cross-departmental type approach, process thinking, this is just an example of how I would map that out. For in this case, it would be let's say for a bank or something, but that's the sort of tools that you can use. And we have now digital options as well in the world, don't we? Like things like, those sticky note workshops or digital whiteboards. So use them and yeah, get all the heads together. Another one is manual workarounds. You see here a little joke, of course, those ladies playing that card game, Solitaire. I don't know if you remember it, but the manual workaround was actual cards. you know, as a joke, okay? What you find is manual workarounds still may require maintenance. And I would say they're often not documented because you think, oh, we'll just do it the old way, you know? But young people in your business, they don't know what the old way is. So still document your manual workaround and practice them. Tip number 4, keep validating assumed remote work locations, including secure IT access. Now, we've gone through 8 months or 9 months of COVID. You'd think all the issues with remote work have now been resolved and everybody knows what they're doing. Let me tell you, the number of cyber attacks, data leaks, specifically targeting home workers, you know, because all the vulnerabilities and sometimes in what they've got, not every staff member knows how to turn the VPN on, all of that sort of stuff. So think about validating and continuously growing and investing in those remote work solutions, because every day that you think you're ahead of the game, potentially hackers or other people are also ahead of the game, you know, so it's certainly very important. Tip number 5 is catering for fatigue and unavailability of key staff. So I mentioned earlier, if a whole group of staff members are sick, not in this current pandemic situation where they're working from home, is assume they're really ill and half the staff cannot actually perform because they're in hospital. Who are then the second and third in charge? Have you got that job rotation type initiative where they all have a taste of other roles before actually an incident happens? Number 6, dual supplier arrangements. I think we talked about that enough, you know, actually knowing what position do you have on your supplier's priority listing? Yeah, so will you actually get the first help or someone else? All right. Oh, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button here. So next tip, number 7, is internal comms and awareness, you know, using free or cheap tools if needed, WhatsApp, Yammer, I'm highlighting a few here. Having a really great communication process, a combination of push communication, which is texting your staff, hoping they get the message, and pull communication, where all your staff, once they know there's an incident, can actually monitor on, for example, a digital whiteboard or an internal blog or something, or a free call number, get the updates on where your recovery process is at and what instructions do you have for staff. So not just pushing messages to them, hoping they read them via SMS or whatever, or email, but actually also making staff responsible to pull the communication from somewhere every hour, for example. Number 8, this is all about, again, external communication, having consistent messages, internal and external, and look for the opportunities. You might remember KFC, you know, who made a very successful, humorous campaign after they survived a incident where there was not enough supply of chicken in their stores. Now that's pretty bad for a chicken shop, you know. So they actually used it as an opportunity to turn it around and to make all the customers actually double impressed with how quickly they had a great campaign and how much humor, and I think they had some special deals and things. So, you know, you can actually see the silver lining often in an incident as well. Okay, tip number 9 is using your BCP capability to achieve better insurance. Yeah, I touched on that on the first slide, you know, really use that for discounts, for example. And tip number 10. Now, this is really important. I'd like you to focus just for a few moments on this. I know we're getting close to the end, but colorful documentation, concise, easy to maintain and activate. For example, risk matrices, using color codings, traffic light systems, and including pandemic, for example, or cyber attacks or floods or fires or power failures or whatever in that same model. Don't make it a whole separate risk matrix or model. You know, have a centralized umbrella type approach for your risk assessment and your BCP. Same for number 6 here, continuity provisions, checklists, damage assessment checklist, for example, quick reference cards where all your staff and managers can tick the boxes, yes or no, and then maybe have some initial actions behind them. I hope that makes sense. The models that you use for BCP should not be 500 pages that people have to dig through when an incident happens. Yeah, because they don't have time. They will be panicking potentially. They don't have their head around reading all of that. And often those big documents get out of date. So I use a lot of these kind of good extracts that give people a quick instruction. And the same with our BCP on a page types templates. So you might have some consequence scenarios up the top. some key business processes on the left-hand side. And then in green, you see a couple of examples of the initial workarounds, in this case, for example, putting a web notice up, and the full continuity solution, which is diversion by the phone company to home phones or mobiles, and a threshold in between, which you could relate as a MTPD, or tolerable period of disruption. These are just some models I wanted to show you on how nice and concise your BCP can be. There may be some details behind some of those boxes, but not by default from every single department coming up with hundreds of pages. So that was the 10 tips. Now here you can see a little bit on how these are actually listed in the ISO 22301 standard. You see all the sections of the standard here. And you can also read on here, all the different bits. You can see, for example, in 8.2, business impact analysis and risk assessment, which I mentioned in the presentation. Yeah, so you can see in that standard, all of these topics are covered. Rehearsal, someone mentioned, testing, all of that is also in there. And of course, monitoring the performance evaluation of the process itself, like internal audits, etc. So I don't think I've ever done the 10 tips so swiftly. It helped that we talked about quite a few of them beforehand. But I wanted to leave you with this slide to say, these are my details. If this all went like a massive whirlwind and you're still trying to recover, then please let it distill. If you've got a question, put me a LinkedIn message or something, connect me up on LinkedIn, and look at the articles that I've published in there. Yeah, like I said, I'd love to come to India one day, or to Malaysia again, or to Europe, and do that work wherever you guys are all based, and do this in real life. Yeah, I hope you got some insights from this presentation on how to keep BCP practical. Yeah, everybody can buy the ISO standard, but actually to do the work and transform the people around you at all levels in the organization, that requires a bit more skill. So I've tried to share most of my knowledge there.
Yeah.
So, I'm still okay for questions, but let's see.
Okay. Thank you, Rinske, for this very enriching knowledge sharing session.
You're most welcome.
Before we start the question answer, maybe we'll take 5-10 minutes for that also. What I want to say is, when we talk about BCP, business continuity planning, or business continuity management system, I mean, this is all basically quality management systems. One is related to another one.
Yeah.
Now this COVID-19, the BCP has been existing for long now, but over the last almost say 8 months or 9 months, I mean, today is 19th, day before yesterday was the first anniversary of this dear friend COVID, the novel coronavirus. We completed 1 year with living with this globally. So COVID-19 has affected the one common thing globally, one common thing, that is the human resilience. We talk about organizational resilience, Rinske.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you maybe your views, and since we have a couple of senior people who have joined this session, also can put light on it, and then probably when they raise the questions can relate to it. Pandemic response preparedness. This period has been a test of resilience and continuity planning. And the key remains with organization resilience and human resilience. So how do you put it that way? What's your take on this?
Well, what I can say is, in terms of the key ingredient in any business continuity plan, as I mentioned earlier, that is your human workforce, and your and their extended families, by the way, as well. So there's an article that I wrote, and you can read it on LinkedIn as well, which talks all about that. The assumptions in most BCPs where we say, oh, of course, all the staff will be there to activate this plan. And in real life, that might not be the case. They may be stressed out, they may be panicking, they may be actually affected by the incident, in this case, pandemic. So I mentioned job rotation schemes, having alternate workarounds in terms of staff unavailability. All of that you can pre-plan. You can actually rehearse those things too. And in my view, that's not done enough. People actually really had assumed And during pandemic, they had the luxury of slowly moving staff to home, or half the workforce first and then some other people. In a real incident where you have a massive impact on staff, for example, a terrorist attack or something, that's over the space of a couple of seconds. And you're going to have some sort of, process in place to initially respond, to ensure health and well-being. And on top of that, quickly have a business continuity plan in place for that. And that relies a lot on having first and second alternates for staff, I would say.
Yeah, definitely, because it relates to your, the business continuity is all about people, place, process, technology, and assets. So people come first. So basically it is a development of, rather raising the level of human resilience, and then comes the organizational resilience ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and that's
okay.
what often people forget.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we'll take some questions, and I would request whoever wants to ask a question, maybe for next 10 minutes we'll ask questions. I would request Hatim Bilal to ask the question, and if he can ask his question, he wants to know something. And over to you, Hatim Bilal.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, please,
thank you.
please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Very softly. Can you speak a little bit harder?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Rinske, for this very valuable session and very informative.
You're welcome.
My question is about the impact or how COVID-19 will change the priorities in business continuity planning in the near future, whether it is the BCP assumptions, the capability that's available for recovery, and what will be the trend, the expected trends in the organizational resilience as general, based on the impact of COVID-19. Thank you.
Well, like with everything in life, all the bad things come with good things. So no disaster is ever one-sided, or no incident in life is ever one-sided. And it's best to ask the question, what's the benefit here, as soon as possible, rather than dwelling on the negatives. And some of you may know that, like I said, I'm relating it to real life. When something happens to you, it is really a good question to ask of what is the benefit. I've suggested the same to many businesses that I work with, and to say immediately during the actual phase of COVID-19, what are we learning? What are we gaining? What are we seeing as benefits? What are we doing better already? You know, and for example, the fact, well, we can talk about this for hours, of course, but the fact that staff finally have an actual justified and proven reason to say, it doesn't matter where I work, I can be productive in another place. What that's created is certain challenges, because now, for example, in Australia, the government has actually asked all businesses and government departments to actually try and get staff back working in the city to support the local businesses in the city center. You know, and they're having a lot of trouble, because I think the target was 40% amongst all government departments to have staff coming back to the office. They're having struggle getting 20% of staff back, because staff are saying, well, I don't need to be in the office. I've been productive for the last 9 months. You've seen it, you know, give me the tools, save yourself some money, save me some effort and time traveling in traffic every day, you know. So that's a major benefit in some ways. Also a challenge for some businesses who rely on staff being in the office, on the ground, or in a factory workflow, for example. You know, a lot of people are trying to minimize the hours that they're actually there. So it comes with challenge, it comes with benefits. In terms of business priorities, I think to a certain degree, there has been also more understanding between parties. Like if I'm a supplier to another organization, we both have been challenged by COVID, you know, usually. So there's also quite a lot of understanding and empathy, if I can call it that, between businesses, because we were all dealing with this massive global disaster called pandemic. You know, normally when you make a BCP, you're assuming something might happen to just your street, your business, your industry, you know, but now we've dealt with this global massive thing that most businesses were not prepared for. So there has been quite a lot of positive, quite a few positive relations have been built through this business relations by saying, hey, how can we help each other in this? For example, I've got a particular client that I was working for earlier in the year, and they rely actually on office space, you know, to actually sit together and brainstorm about things. During the pandemic, they didn't have all of that prepared. They didn't have another place to go to. But one of their customers said, well, you can work from here. We've got this secure space. We've got enough 4 square meters per person kind of distance. So we don't have the COVID safety issue here. You could come here. And those sorts of relationships and those sorts of opportunities to give each other help, yeah, they've also been triggered by COVID. So I certainly don't see it all as bad. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned. I mean, I've seen businesses make decisions that they were sitting on for the last 7 years. For example, having sufficient VPN capacity. Yeah, I hope you can relate to some of these things. You know, like I've heard IT people lobbying for more VPN connections because it's, you know, it needs to happen. And, you know, if in case staff work from home, finally with COVID, hey, now we see that increased. Because on the other hand, businesses are also saving money by not having staff in the office, taking up space, turning on the aircon and all that stuff. You know, they see there's actually a benefit for them too. So if they pass some of that benefit to their staff, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? All right, just looking at if there's further questions. The 10 tips were the cherry on the cake. Well, I'm very glad to hear that from Sanjay Gore. Yeah, I've been, yeah.
Anybody wants to ask any question?
Yes, Rinske. This is Arman from Manila.
Yeah, please ask.
Yes. My question is, in the 29 version of the ISO 22301, it has an emphasis on the solution, right? So my question is, what is the difference between strategies and solutions?
Look, it's just one more level of practicality in there. Strategies are things like, do we, for example, rely on mutual aid agreements with other businesses? Or do we rely on work from home as a strategy? Yeah. Or do we send staff, for example, to a centralized office environment? That's strategic level decisions. Now, solutions and processes and procedures around all of that are the more tangible things. Like a solution might be, if I have a reciprocal aid agreement, a solution might be, I specifically look for partnerships in a particular industry. That's a particular solution. I then actually sit around the table with them to draw up some memorandums of understanding, for example. They are getting to more the solution level. And then you have underneath, you have procedures, for example. So how do I quickly run over to one of my partners and actually take up some space there or use their manufacturing facility? That will have procedures, more detailed. So strategies, solutions, procedures, you know, and tools.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the difference. But strategies are really about, like I said, remote work. The sort of strategies I was mentioning earlier. Having multiple data centers as a backup for each other, you know, that's a strategic kind of choice, if that makes sense. Yeah, so the solutions are more hands-on, I would say.
Okay, yeah. I have a follow-up question. I know that the units or operations are the one who should respond to an incident or crisis, but where does the incident management team come in?
Well, the incident management team, I call them usually crisis management team. That would be the senior executives, plus usually corporate affairs or corporate communication and legal. That would be my definition of a crisis management team normally. It's a bit flexible, you know, you can massage this a little bit, but that would be my solution there. And then they would define what needs to happen at the more practical level. So the recovery teams to say, hey, who's responsible for recovering our assets, for example, our factory assets? Who's responsible for our office workers to get them working from home? They're more hands-on teams. Now, you mentioned incident management team or incident response team?
Yes, incident
team?
or recovery teams. Yeah, because
incident management teams,
some structure has this crisis management team, so that's the executive level. But some structure, there's also the immediate responders, the incident management team, depending on the threats or the incident. they could be IT team or facilities team.
Yeah.
And then they're the business units to respond to the particular incident.
Yeah. Yeah. The lower level you go, the more it sort of aligns to the organizational structure. Am I making sense? Like
Yes.
the initial crisis management team type roles, they're usually not day-to-day roles. Like I said, it could be your executive plus corporate communications plus legal or something. That's usually a bit of a non-BAU type structure. Whereas when you get to the more practical levels, you usually have representatives from each division somewhere in those other more practical teams. There's one thing I'd like to say though, and that is, I have seen real benefits of having multi-departmental, multidisciplinary teams. So not just say, hey, the people recovery team or the IT recovery team or the facilities recovery team, because they tend to just plan for their own little group. And they go, oh, as long as we have a laptop and we have this and we have that, then we're okay. You know, if you define the teams a little bit more cross-departmental, they will start thinking, how can we share resources? Because those people clearly need those tools a little quicker because what they're doing is more urgent. It creates a bit more resilience and a bit more over the wall, cross-silo type thinking. You know, silos are a concept that you may have heard of, like where everybody just does their own little bit in a business and they don't look at over the wall what other departments are there. You don't want that in a disaster because it's already hard in a day-to-day to maintain your own area. In a disaster, you might have to, like I said, share or come up with creative solutions. For example, hey, can my department borrow some staff from your department because mine are all sick? You know, that kind of cross-departmental thinking, you want to really instill that in a business to create more capacity, you know, more capability, more readiness, more creativity, innovation, etc. in a real incident. So I'm always looking for different ways to do things. I hope that makes sense, you know, and not just go, hey, where's the org chart? Oh, we'll make all the divisions just responsible for their own recovery. You know, I always go, even at the lower levels, I define usually cross-departmental type teams. And I might call that the business recovery team, which has a whole heap of representatives from different business units in there that can also cross-pollinate a little bit what solutions they're applying. Am I sort of talking along the lines of what you could apply, do you think, or what's?
Yes. Very good answer. One last quick question. Sorry. You mentioned that all of the trash should be embedded in one plan, but this pandemic hit us heavily. So, and some regulators here in Manila are requiring us to have a separate plan for pandemic. So do we have to have a separate plan for this pandemic, or it can be included in the general plan?
Well, I believe we have BCPs based on impact scenarios, consequence scenarios. Now, pandemic has a few impacts. Yeah, let me, I can't share that particular screen anymore. If you, for example, look at a pandemic, it has impact on staff. It has impact on your building and how you can use it. So there are two major impacts. Yeah, and any scenario or any incident has certain impacts. And I believe pretty much every incident that I've dealt with, you could actually translate to some of those impacts. So I always use a very generic building blocks in a BCP. The specific procedures for each of those hundreds of different incidents can be owned by the subject matter experts. For example, if there's a flood, well, there's some guy in facility who's going to, you know, how to clean that up, or some lady in admin who knows how to do that. They're already experts on that. I don't need a BCP to tell them what to do if there's something that happens. Same with IT, same with things like, you know, supply chain. You know, there's always people who are experts at those detailed scenarios that are the hundreds of at the detailed incidents, which can be hundreds of different things. But the next step is, what's the impact of this? Right, we're locked out of the building, for example. Could be 37 different incidents that can cause that. We talked about tsunamis, floods, explosions, terrorist attacks, whatever. We're locked outside the building. That could be one central sort of impact scenario that we make a BCP for. So the actual BCP procedures can be just based on 5 or 6 major scenarios, even though hundreds of incidents could cause those scenarios to happen.
Yes. Okay. Yeah? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem at all.
Thank you, Rinske. Thank you for asking. We can take 2 more questions or maybe 3. And then I think we have exceeded the time limit. If you are comfortable, we can carry on for 10 minutes, because then once we are done with the questions, then we'll be summing up with participants only. So please ask. There are two people, Askar Ali and Loganathan wants to ask something. Anybody else wants to ask a question? Yeah, anybody?
Hello.
Yeah. Please, your name, and then you can ask the question, please.
Hello, good day. This is Loganathan from Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, please.
Are you hear me?
Yep.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Yes. Just I want to clear one thing. Actually, 23001 is the common for all business. And actually the business, we have the different business, different type of businesses, and industries are actually business, and manufacturing unit, transportation, like that. If we have, then they develop the plan for the business continuity, whatever they have the disturbances in their business. And if they miss something in their planning, then how the audit will be conducted and how they get the certification.
I think you just dropped out a little bit, but are you saying that an organization didn't quite plan for every scenario, or they excluded parts of their business and still want to get certified? Is that what you're asking?
No, what I'm asking, if they have the different businesses, but the certification is common, right? Yeah, in these business, separate businesses, if they have the separate log of the disturbances, scenarios and everything. For example, the protection unit doesn't have any disturbances like that to the transport. And the normal business is they don't have any disturbances like that to the transportation. So if they miss any points to develop their continuity plan, then how they, during the audit, how they fix it?
I hope I understand your actual question, but every business has different vulnerabilities, has different applicable risks, you know. So if I do a job for a company in Kuching in Malaysia, or I do a job for a organization in Sydney, Australia, or in Europe, you know, they all have different certain different threats and levels of those threats, like what might happen. So as a result, yeah, your business continuity strategies and priorities and solutions might also differ. You know, every part of the geographical changes you've got, of course, between different organizations, but also which industry they operate in. You know, for example, I worked a lot in banks where I don't know, money laundering was a key risk or something, you know, or cyber attacks. Whereas I go and work for an ambulance service, you know, in my country, and nobody cares about the IT. They're all saying we need vehicles and we need a paper-based list on where the next person can be picked up to be taken to hospital. You know, so the threats and the solutions that you're looking for are very different, and that's why all of you, including me, actually are all in this job. You know, where you're doing business continuity. It's not mathematical. Business continuity planning is it's a very creative process. You come up with different innovative solutions for the typical, or the specific organization you're doing this for, and the industry they operate in. So that's what keeps me waking up every day and being excited, you know? It's not a predictable process. Yeah, you need to come up with really good ideas for organizations that are applicable and are easy to apply. And well, that's different every day. So I hope that makes sense.
So I should say thank you so much, Loga. Thank you for asking, and thank you for answering, Rinske. So I should say it's basically logical thinking, and how you react to the situation is situational leadership skills that come on your way to handle any kind of situation and then come up to the occasion to handle any incident or the kind of a problems or maybe a threat or something like that.
Yes,
I think, so thank you so much. And I think we have Askar Ali also wanted to know something, and probably we'll sum up the session. Yeah, anybody wants to ask a question? Okay. So we would now sum up. Thank you so much all you have participated. Now from the participants, I would request a couple of people to say something about the session. And first of all, I would request Mr. Aditya Grover to say something about that.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. You are?
Yes, this is Joseph from Senegal.
Yeah, please. Mr.
Yes, just have one question for Ma. I would just like to know how to manage the government pandemic decision and enterprise BCB to get the best results of the pandemic management. I don't know if you get the question.
Well, how you manage pandemic scenarios and the changes in our pandemic situation over the months, how a government can manage that? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, the government, during the pandemic, the government takes some decision.
Yeah.
And the organization generally has its own BCP plan. So how to manage these two decisions?
Yeah,
potentially
potentially conflicting.
Yes.
Yes, I get it. Yeah, so we have the same in Australia, where there's a state and federal emergency services, and they sometimes decide, no, you cannot go into this area, for example. And in your BCP, you've written, oh, but I'm going to send my staff to that area because there's a spare office there or something. Yeah, that's something you work with. I mean, the more restrictions come from government, whilst it's challenging, it also creates more context for your customers, for example, to understand that you cannot do better than this. Yeah, so it gives less freedom to businesses if governments have their own decisions that they're making in terms of restrictions. Like, for example, that you can't fly from city 1 to city 2 in Australia at the moment, because of COVID. Many businesses I dealt with, they had flying staff from city 1 to city 2 and work from that office. Yeah, that can't happen now. So many customers of those businesses also have more understanding because they know even if you want to do it, it's now illegal to do so. So yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, the thing with pandemic, it's nobody had this really planned out. And I had been saying, honestly, Joseph, and I've been to East Africa and the rest of Africa as well. A lot of times you're in Senegal. I'd like to visit there one day. But look, globally, I had been telling people for the last 7 or 8 years since SARS, the very first kind of, pandemic scenarios, I had been telling people to make plans for this if it was to hit their city or, their area, their country and their business. And people were staring at me, honestly, like this will never happen. Certainly not in developed countries like Australia. We will never have this kind of pandemic flu because we're healthy here. We've got good medical services. There'll be no business impact at all. So finally now people have seen this would have been a good idea, and therefore those simulations that you mentioned, like if the government decides we cannot travel, nobody believed even that was a valid question 2 years ago. If I was trying to do a business continuity test or exercise and I said, let's do a pandemic scenario or just even a local flu, or a local disease, people would look at me and go, nah, nobody believes that. No. We're not interested in that, They all want to simulate if there's a power failure or the systems are down or the building is flooded, So yeah, I guess I told you so is what I could put a big statement on LinkedIn, 4 words, and I didn't do that, but it is certainly true, and some of these things that you highlighted about government decisions and everything, nobody knew that, honestly. Nobody could visualize that this would go this way with this whole COVID, of course, as well. So I think that's probably my final words on that question, Joseph. It's absolutely a challenge, and I think in every country it has been, to follow what the government is telling people to do, etc. So, is that sufficient for now?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rinske. I
No
think,
problem.
So to sum up, I would request 3-4 names. I'll take one by one. We have Ryan Kalas. Are you able to hear me, Mr. Ryan? Mr. Ryan, can you hear me? Mr. Ryan Kalas? Okay. Next, I would request Mr. Karthik Prasad is here. Karthik, you are there, I think. Karthik.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Yeah, just want to hear 2-3 lines from you about the session today.
Actually, I was hearing I had joined the session from the beginning onwards, and it was actually very much informative session, like providing more insights on this 2230 and clauses or standards, and relating it to our ongoing pandemic situations. And this is actually a very fruitful discussions, which needs to be going forward. Also, we should have such discussions. And I thank Rinske for this wonderful session. Like, she was patiently hearing all those questions and was able to provide all the wonderful answers with respect to the questions. And that's very nice of you. Thank you, Alvin team, also for
thank you,
making these
Karthik.
sessions.
Thank you, Karthik. It's because of you people we are able to do it, and I can see you joining all the sessions. Thank you so much. I would request Mr. Sanjay Gore to say a few words about the session today. Over to you, Mr. Sanjay Gore.
Yeah. It is nice time. Actually, I enjoyed each and every sentence what she was talking, especially 10 tips. What she has, as I already said, it is a cherry on the cake. Secondly, most important is she is more practical and giving all information whichever is required. And another highlight of this today's session is it is more participative. Most of the people have participated. It is just like a roundtable discussion. Instead of one person is telling and others are listening, and it is insightful. I enjoyed it fully, and I am very happy that I feel fortunate enough to attended this. And special thanks to Rinske and Alvin for organizing this session. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful time.
Sanjay ji, thank you so much. You have joined. We are able to do it. You are a stalwart of the industry, specialized in ISO 27K. We look forward to more and more views and support from you. I would.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure, sir.
Yeah. Now I would request Aaron Thomas to say a few words. Aaron, you are there. Aaron, you are there, or you are left, I think. Okay, now I can request Apurva is there. Apurva, can you hear us? Apurva, can you hear us? Are you there?
Apurva, just try to unmute yourself. You have the option to unmute.
Okay, I think Apurva is unable to do that. I can request Mr. Rohit Verma to say a few words, if Rohit is there.
Yes, Madhu, sure. This was really a very interesting session, and I got to learn different perspectives of how one should see the BCM planning, the crisis situations. And I particularly like the idea of having a colorful business continuity plan, so that the end users, in terms of the BCM process owners of respective departments, they find it interesting, and the different aspects are covered in different colors. So that's really interesting. That's something I found very interesting. So overall, the session was very interesting and educational. So thank you, Rinske, and thank you, Madhu.
Thank you, Rohit. Can I request Mr. Joy to say a few words? Joy, you are there? Joy Cortez? Joy, can you hear me, Joy?
Yes.
Yeah, please say a few words about the session today. It's basically, it's not a classroom. We are all there. We are all educated. We are all reasonably experienced people. We are just sharing the platform to share our knowledge and views. So we want to hear from you. You have been here for the last almost 1.5 hour now. It was scheduled for 1 hour only, but I think we have exceeded. And thanks to Rinske for being patient and you all be here. We want to hear a few words from you, Joy. Please go ahead.
I think her sound is not working very well.
There is a problem.
I had an interruption earlier too, so
maybe something like that. Okay, to sum up the session, I think it was very enriching. People have enjoyed, interacted. Please feel free to give suggestions so that we can do it in a more participative manner, more informative manner. So please feel free to suggest, and thank you everyone. Thank you everyone. So before I thank Rinske, I should thank all of you to join us, who have joined us and then taken time out from their busy schedule this evening, and somewhere it is night, like Rinske. I think I have done her dinner and then maybe now go to sleep or something like that. And then
dinner's finished.
People come. Yeah, you're finished. So thank you so much. Hope all of you have enjoyed. Thank you so much. And thank you, Alvin, for organizing these webinars. Very, really grateful for this gesture. And
thank you, Rinske, and thank you, Mr. Madhu, and thank you all participants. It is a pleasure to serve you better. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Please keep joining us.
Thank you, Alvin, and services, sir, for organizing and hosting all of this. It's very useful, sir. Great job.
Thank you so much.